Photography in the farthest, loneliest corners of the land has been the heartbeat of my life for as long as I can remember. While most people wake to alarms and commute to familiar desks, I've spent my years packing a camera, shouldering a pack, and stepping off the edge of maps. The wild places, the ones that don't care if you survive the night or not, have always called to me. I've curled up in canyons beneath the smell of dust and rain, slept on the spines of high ridges where wind rattled the rocks, and one bitter night I even dug a shallow snow cave when a mountain storm slammed in hours before I expected it. I'm not easily frightened. If anything, the hush of a place where no human voice has been for weeks is the one thing I crave. In August of 2021, I was deep in the Great Basin Desert, chasing a new series of photographs. Near the lonely flats east of Ely, Nevada, the land spreads out so empty it feels like walking across the bones of an ancient ocean. In daylight, the salt crust glares white under a furnace sky. At night, the heat drops away so fast your breath smokes, and the stars look close enough to scrape your palms if you reach up. I'd been driving dirt tracks, hiking out with a full pack, moving camp every couple of days to find the right angles on distant rock formations. For 2 weeks, I slipped in and out of those wastelands without seeing another soul. It was my rhythm, miles of dirt road, nights of solitary camps, a map folded to my roots, a GPS clipped to my belt, more water than I thought I'd ever need. On the 5th day, I found something that didn't belong. There aren't many trees in that part of the desert, mostly waist-high sage, brittle brush, the occasional twisted juniper clawing out of the gravel. But this was a tree standing by itself, like a survivor from a forgotten age. I think it was an oak, its trunk thick and old, branches stretching crookedly as if it had fought a lifetime of storms to remain alive. It wasn't the tree itself that routed me to the spot, it was what hung from it. Iron chains, mottled with deep rust, some heavy enough to tow a truck, were looped around the upper branches and left to dangle several feet above the sand. Other lengths were coiled so tightly around the trunk that the bark had begun to grow over them, swallowing the metal as the tree thickened through the years. I remember the way my breath slowed as I stepped closer, the hush of the desert settling deeper into my ears. I walked around it, circling slow every few feet, raising my camera. There was nothing else in sight. For miles, no broken ranch fence, no corral post, no abandoned mine rig, nothing to explain why someone would drag iron so far into the empty basin only to lash it to a living tree. I told myself it might have been ranch gear from some forgotten decade, maybe a tether point for a long-gone corral, maybe even a prank. But the feeling I got staring at that tree wasn't curiosity. It was that slight, cold wrongness you feel when you stumble on something that feels arranged, staged, like someone had put it there to be found by whoever wandered close enough. I'd come across strange things before, in the wilderness, graffiti on a sandstone bluff, miles from a road, a rusted washing machine lying in the middle of a dry arroyo, a row of shut TV screens dumped in a canyon like a shrine to static, but the chains fused into living bark lodged somewhere deeper in me. I camped about 200 yards away, intending to photograph the place at sunrise when the low light would drag long shadows from the chains. I spent the evening crouched over my tiny stove, cooking a packet of freeze-dried pasta, sipping gritty instant coffee, checking through the day's shots. The world was so still I could hear the quiet hiss of insects in the brush. Somewhere far off, a coyote yipped once, and then silence closed over it again. I remember lying back on my sleeping pad, staring up at the sky black enough to feel bottomless. The Milky Way spilled across it like a river of ash. I set my alarm for before dawn and zipped into the sleeping bag. I don't remember sliding into sleep, but I remember the moment I woke. At first it was faint, a soft metallic clink that I mistook for part of a dream. I shifted inside the bag, listening harder. Another clink, then a faint scraping sound like rough links of metal dragging against bark. I sat up and unzipped the tent just enough to lean out. The night was motionless. No hint of wind. The stars burned overhead like frost on black glass. My eyes went straight to the tree. The chains were swaying, only a little, just enough to catch the starlight. I froze, staring. My first thought was coyotes, maybe brushing the chains as they passed, but the sound had come from higher up, from the branches. He held still, waiting for the soft shuffle of paws, the snort of some stray mule deer. Nothing. Just the slow creak of chain against wood, as if something had tugged it and then let it go. I closed the tent and sat with my flashlight in one hand, my camera in the other. Minutes dragged by, and at last the sound stopped. I told myself it had to be the night air cooling the iron, making it contract. A sensible answer. Morning came, sharp and cold. I shot what I came for: wide frames of the oak against the empty horizon. Close shots of the bark swallowing rust. The desert stretching away under a pale sky. I tried to push the memory of that midnight sound to the back of my mind, but it kept slipping forward like a splinter under the skin. By evening, I debated breaking camp and moving on. The photos were done, but something stubborn in me wanted to prove it had been nothing. Just nerves, just desert stillness playing tricks. I stayed. I followed the same routine. Cooking, checking batteries, sipping bitter coffee. This time I left my phone's recorder running before I zipped myself in. Around 1:30 in the morning, I woke again. The sound was backlink scrape, the faint rattle of metal brushing wood. I grabbed the phone. The recorder showed it was picking up only faint static, a low wobbling interference, no clear sound. I unzipped the tent, shone my flashlight toward the tree. The beam caught the rusty links rocking gently, even though the night was windless. The air dead still. Then came a sharp tug, loud enough to echo against the hollow land, the sound of a chain pulled tight, as though by an unseen hand. The beam of my light shook as my hand trembled, but there was nothing there, no coyote, no branch shifting, just the rusted iron swaying in silence. I ducked back into the tent, zipped it shut, and sat gripping the short cook knife I kept in my kit until the black sky turned gray. I packed as the first edge of the sun lifted over the flats, jammed my camera into my pack, and kept my eyes away from the tree as I hiked back to the truck. But I looked back once before I left. It stood exactly as it had the day before, silent, the chains heavy and unmoving in the daylight. Weeks later, when I developed the film, I saw something I couldn't explain. In one frame, the chains weren't hanging slack, they were stretched outward, angled away from the trunk, as if yanked by something beyond the edge of the photograph. I had no memory of ever seeing them like that. I showed the print to a fellow photographer who laughed and accused me of staging it to spook my clients. I didn't argue. Explaining would only make me sound unhinged. But I remember what I saw. Or more precisely, what I didn't see. The pull that came out of the still night. The sway that had no wind to cause it. In the desert, you learn fast that the land doesn't belong to you. And sometimes, whatever was left there long before you arrived, still has a grip of its own.